Hey everyone, it's Graham Coleman with Daily Xtra, and I'm speaking with Marc-André LeBlanc from Gatineau, Quebec. He's currently using pre-exposure prophylaxis, known as PrEP, as an HIV prevention method. Marc-André, thank you for speaking with us.
My pleasure.
So when did you start using PrEP?
I started about a year and a half ago, so in April 2013.
And what made you decide to take it?
Well, there were many things. I've been actually working in HIV for about 20 years. In the past 12 years, I've been focusing mostly on the development of new HIV prevention options. So I already knew about PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis, for a number of years before I started taking it.
Okay.
And I also am very well aware of what are some of the signs that someone is at risk for HIV. And I had noticed some shifts in my own behavior around HIV prevention, and I realized that this tool, which I already knew about, that I hadn't considered as a possibility for myself, suddenly made sense for me.
Does it worry you that it hasn't been approved in Canada yet?
It doesn't worry me. It's been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, so the U.S.
Right.
FDA. It's under review right now in Brazil and in South Africa. And it's been a medication that's been around and used for over 12 years. So there's millions of people around the world who've been using it with very few problems. So that certainly didn't concern me.
So for yourself, when you're using it, are you also using condoms as well?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. And that was part of the shift in behavior for me that led me to decide to use PrEP and to maximize the number of strategies that I was using to minimize my risk. So for a number of years, I was, a perfect condom adherer, if you will. I always used condoms if I was having anal sex with someone. And I had noticed that in the past years, as it is the case with many gay men, I wasn't using them 100% of the time. And so I wanted to minimize my risk as much as possible. And so that's why, knowing what I knew about PrEP, that I would probably be a good candidate for it.
And since taking PrEP, has your sexual behavior become more risky?
So the change in my behavior actually had started before taking PrEP. So that was because of a concern to make sure that I remain negative,
Right.
that I decided to use PrEP. So it didn't cause a change in behavior. I introduced it as a way to keep reducing my risk after I noticed this change in behavior. And so I think for a lot of people, perhaps after the novelty wears off, it doesn't really change your behavior all that much. It just allows you to continue to be sexually active with a tremendously reduced sense of fear and stress and anxiety about the possibility of becoming HIV positive.
And is it working? Are you still HIV negative?
Yes, it's working.
Great.
It's meant to be taken as a pill a day, and as far as I know, after a year and a half, I haven't missed a single dose. A couple of times, especially because I travel quite a bit for work and I'm in different time zones. You sort of and you're out of your usual routine. You're not at home. But as far as I know, I haven't missed a dose.
Are you afraid that you might contract something other than HIV, though?
When you're on PrEP, you're seeing a doctor every 3 months. So every 3 months, I get an HIV test and I get screened for all STIs, which is twice as often as I used to before being on PrEP. I used to get tested every 6 months for everything, and now it's every 3 months. So if I do have anything, it'll be caught very quickly, it'll be treated very quickly, and the risk of me being part of a chain of transmission is actually a lot less now than it was before I was on PrEP, ironically.
Wow. So how much does it cost, and how are you paying for it?
Well, the actual cost of the drug is astronomical and is quite shocking and is really unacceptable. And it's the same price whether it's for treatment or for pre-exposure prophylaxis. This is one of the most commonly prescribed drug for treating people living with HIV. And the cost, certainly in a North American context, is about $900 a month, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The generic version in developing countries, I just met someone just last month who said that in some developing countries where generic versions are available, you can get a month's worth for €8. So we're talking an astronomical amount of markup on this drug, which is really completely ridiculous. I happen to live in Quebec, which has the country's only universal mandatory public drug plan, and it's on the drug formulary. So that means that, as is the case with any prescription drug that's on the formulary in the province of Quebec, you never pay more than about $1,000 a year for your prescription medications. And that's divided up by month. So every month I pay $83.83.
Wow, that's not bad.
Yeah, so that for me was reasonable. I mean, for some people that that is still too much. Depending on where they live, though, even that might not be covered.
So tops are less likely to become HIV positive than bottoms. Are you a top or a bottom, and does that come into play with your decision to use PrEP?
Yeah, I tend to be more of a top, quite frankly, and it's part of the reason why it was, in a way, sort of easy for me to be very consistent with condom use, because I rarely needed to negotiate or insist or cajole or with my partner. I mean, it was up to me to use a condom, and I was able to do that as often as possible. You know, different people are comfortable with different levels of risk. You know, some people are willing to jump out of a plane with a parachute strapped to their back. Others are not. Some people, you know, wait for the walk signal at the intersection. Other people weave through traffic in between corners, you know. And I tend to not like to take on a lot of risk myself. So even though most of the time I'm a top, I'm circumcised, so that increases the risk a little bit to, you know, compared to someone who was circumcised. And so I just wanted to put all the chances on my side as much as possible.
Well, great. Thanks for speaking with us, Marc-André.
My pleasure.